so much, Julie. I'm really pleased to be able to join you, albeit virtually, today. I'm going to cover I'm going to do three segments about equality impact assessment. The first one, each of them are going to last about half an hour. So the first one is about why, so it covers the case for equality, some of the data about industry and diversity in Scotland, some policy issues. The second part, which is about what, covers the legislation, so the relevant legislation that you need to be aware of. So that gives you the legal drivers around equality impact assessment, but probably most importantly, the third session, which is how. So what is it you're expected to do? What's the legislation requiring of you? And in that, I'm going to do a worked example. So that'll be about setting up a digital hub and a training centre for boosting people's participation in digital industry and skills. So that hopefully that will give you an idea of what it is that's expected of you and how you go about it. Just by way of, or by amplification of what Julie's saying, my role in the Scottish Government is to help you. So I've been seconded into the government to provide support to the 12 city region deals in Scotland around equality, diversity and inclusion. I was doing a lot of work from the Commission beforehand for about 2 or 3 years. And it's great to be able to do this full time now. And so what I do is I look at your business cases, I provide feedback, I point you towards things which maybe you haven't seen already. Ideally make links between yourselves and other deals so you learn from their experiences. I also have a scrutiny role in that sense, so I will say, look, I'm not happy about this, I think you could do this more. The idea being that once you've got the operational business case done and the equality aspects are covered, actually doing the equality impact assessment is going to be pretty straightforward. It is a legal requirement, so it's something you need to do properly and well, but hopefully by doing all of the prep, the business case, then it will flow really naturally and you're really just recording a lot of the stuff that you've already done already. Now I think Julie's going to get everybody to introduce themselves now, so by way of introduction, my name's Chris Oswald. I'm sitting in my kitchen in Edinburgh today on a really damp, dreary day. Many years ago, I lived for about 7 years in Aberdeen. And for those of you with long memories, I lived above Mr. Marcini's ice cream shop, which is right next door to the Pittodrie Bar on King Street. And I still hear the noise from the Pittodrie Bar. So that's me. Julie, would you like to get other folk to introduce themselves?
Hi, thank you, Chris. So I'm Julie Wood. I'm the Aberdeen City Region Deal Programme Manager. Laurie, will I hand to you?
Yes, my name's Laurie Manson. I'm the Opportunities for All Manager with the Business and Skills team.
Lindsay?
Hi, I'm Lindsay Harrow and I'm the Employability Key Worker for No One Left Behind.
Catherine?
Hi, I'm Catherine. I'm also an Employability Key Worker on No One Left Behind.
Amy?
Amy Ferguson, Senior Support Officer within the Smart Cities team at Aberdeen City Council.
Kundai?
Hi, I'm Kundai and I'm a solicitor at Aberdeen City Council.
Nicole?
Hi, I'm Nicole Bow and I'm a key worker for the Parental Employability Support Fund.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I think that's everyone.
Great. Now I'm going to switch across to slideshow. So can you all see the head slide, the equality impact assessment, why, what and how?
We can.
Great. Well, so I'll just make a start then. The first section that we're going to look at is why, which is the social and policy context of equality impact assessment. This is an area which is very close to my heart. So in a nutshell, this slide about Scotland's equality challenges really starts to sum up what it is that we're looking to do. So at the moment in Scotland, disabled people are almost twice as likely to be unemployed as non-disabled Scots. I say almost, the disability employment rate has been rising quite significantly over the years. We're now around about 47% of disabled people in work, but that's up against about 80%, 85% of non-disabled people. I think it's highly likely that disabled people are going to be disproportionately affected during the current economic crisis. A lot of the jobs which disabled people are currently occupying are in some of the most vulnerable sections of the economy, and also with the slowdown in access to training and skills acquisition, that places a major challenge as for them there. Just so you know, disabled people in Scotland, about 1 in 5 of the population of Scotland is disabled. Disability increases with age. I'm in my 50s now, and a doctor kindly told me that by the time I reach my age, I should have about 3 disabilities. Actually, he's right. So as a rough rule of thumb, this is just a rough rule of thumb, about 7 to 10% of younger people, 16 to 24s, may have disabilities, and that will rise gradually the workforce till you get to older people or people reaching a retirement age, where you have a significantly higher proportion, maybe 15 to 17%. Inevitably, as we age, we are more likely to acquire disabilities. In terms of ethnicity, ethnic minorities in Scotland are twice as likely to be unemployed, twice as likely to be living in poverty, and 4 times as likely to be living in overcrowded accommodation than white Scots. This is across every ethnicity, and it's across every area of Scotland. So well, by ethnic minorities, I'm talking particularly about people, visible ethnic minorities, so from Chinese, Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi people to people of African, Afro-Caribbean origin. And it is one of these really stark issues, which we will pick up again. So again, one of the big things which we're wanting to do through the Inclusive Growth Programme is to get more and more people into training and employment from ethnic minority communities. And then, I think as we've known for many years, women are concentrated, tend to be concentrated in the junior to middle management layers of industry and commerce, and very often in low-paying roles. The gender pay gap in Scotland is round about 6% just now. It's been dropping for some time, which is really, really encouraging. One of the biggest things which has an impact on the gender pay gap and on women's progression in the workplace is pregnancy and maternity discrimination, an issue which I've been doing a fair bit of work on before I joined the government. We reckon that pregnancy and maternity discrimination directly affects about 5,000 women in Scotland per annum. And in essence, there's 2 different ways it occurs. Often for women in lower paying, more manual jobs, they tell their employer that they're pregnant, and the employer goes, well, do very well, but I'm really sorry, we don't need you here anymore. There's a number of cases of that. For women in more professional roles, what we see quite often is that you return to work after having no contact with your employer for the year that you've been off on maternity leave. You find that somebody else is doing your job. You find out that the training that's been offered to other people hasn't been offered to you. You haven't been offered the same promotion opportunities. And that in essence, you've lost ground, and that ground is often not recouped. And that has a significant effect on women's earnings over the life course and working, and the progression, and is a major contributor to the gender pay gap. So, as you would suspect, just moving on to thinking about poverty, poverty affects people differently, or people's experience, community's experience of poverty is different, but there are commonalities that we see. So Across Scotland, the average poverty rate, which is very, very closely associated with the white poverty rate, is about 19% just now. It's been dropping for a number of years. It's shown a very slight increase again recently. Sorry, this is data from the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation, which was published in March of 2020. So this is very, very current data that we see. So about 1 in 5 people from in the white Scottish community experience poverty, live with poverty, and often it is quite geographically concentrated. So we see it particularly in parts of the city, in the Shire, and very often in terms, it's associated with public housing. So you will see estates where there are higher levels of poverty than perhaps in the city centre or in other parts of the area. For ethnic minorities, I've already suggested that poverty is double, and there we have it. So for Asian Scots, that's people who are Pakistani, Bangladeshi or Indian, we see a much higher poverty rate of 39%. For Black Scots, so that's people who are of African or Afro-Caribbean descent, again about 38%. So we're just talking pretty much double the poverty rate for white communities. We don't have the data for the Chinese community in this survey, but a previous survey from 2018 suggested that the poverty rate for the Chinese community was touching 50%. So that's almost half of the Chinese community. Now that's interesting because I think we often have this kind of stereotype about Chinese people, tiger moms, highly successful community, but that is balanced, significantly counterbalanced by significant unemployment and very low paid, low wage service industry work. So again, there will be in all communities pockets of relative wealth, but also pockets of significant deprivation. We wrap all of that together and we take a different slanted view towards poverty. We think about the Muslim community in Scotland, and there we see about 50%, one in every other Muslim household is affected by poverty. So that's 2.5 times the average rate. The poverty figures for example, the people who are members of the Church of Scotland and who respond to these surveys is about 15%. So really significant differences as we cut this data by different characteristics. For female lone parents, again, you would tend to see female lone parents concentrated more in public housing areas. That's about 39%. For disabled people, the figure is perhaps a little bit surprisingly 23%. As we've suggested, disability increases with age. So if we have more older people who are relatively, they have quite lower rates of poverty, that's perhaps got something to do with it. The other big issue, though, is for disabled people is that this doesn't include the additional costs of disability. So if you think about additional transport costs, additional costs in terms of maybe having to adapt your house, or other costs, including things like laundry or other things like that, heating, that adds about another 7% or so. So we would say about 1 in 3 disabled people in Scotland are probably living in poverty. And then lastly and not leastly, in terms of child poverty in Scotland, child poverty, I think, off the top of my head, has been rising a little bit more recently. So again, about 1 in 4 of all households in Scotland with children are living in poverty. And as we know, this has big impacts in terms of the life course, in terms of educational attainment, health, mental health, and potential access to work over time. I mentioned in passing this thing about sort of spatial concentrations of poverty. There's been some research done, particularly around ethnicity, looking at the data that we have. And what we see is that people from ethnic minorities are not as concentrated as people from people as white Scots are. And that presents an interesting challenge if we take place-based approaches to poverty and deprivation, or perhaps in terms of employability, that may not capture some of the most deprived people in Scotland who are from our ethnic minority communities. So, for example, where I live in Edinburgh, the most deprived areas tend to be in the peripheral estates, whereas the Bangladeshi community in Edinburgh, which is one of the most deprived, tend to be living around Haymarket Station and Dalry, which is not classified as one of the most deprived areas. So again, one of the things that we would want to be doing with a quality impact assessment when we're looking potentially at place-based approaches is to start to unpick what that data means. I had a look at Aberdeen before, interesting stuff. Unfortunately, the data's a wee bit out of date, but yeah, you can get this sort of stuff from your planners. Anyway, it's definitely one of my favourite topics. I'm having a wee bit of trouble moving my slide. Here we go. Right. So, in terms of the recession, we don't have full data on this yet. Obviously, we're still quite early into the current recession, but this is what we know so far. And it's a pretty uniform picture. So particularly people involved in service industry, in casual labour, in face-to-face work, as we would probably expect, are the people who are bearing the brunt of the current recession. So particularly younger people, 18 to 24, significant losses in earnings, people who are already in the lowest income categories are far more likely to be losing work and losing their jobs and to be concentrated in those sectors which have been shut down. So again, that kind of casualisation of work. Interestingly, and very different from most other recessions that we've been able to track, it's having a disproportionate immediate damage to women's jobs and incomes. And again, this is a lot to do with the shutting down of the service industries, where women are particularly concentrated. Normally in recessions, we see it tending to impact on construction and manufacturing first, which are areas where men are concentrated. This is quite a different beast. As we're seeing, every government has its own challenges in terms of dealing with this. And then both ethnic minority and disabled people, particularly concentrated in distribution, hotels and restaurants, again, where there has been the greatest loss of, greatest risk of job losses, reduced hours and pay. So if we put this on top of the information in the two previous slides, what we see are communities under significant stress being stressed further. And so one of the opportunities which the city region deals investment creates is that opportunity to start to try and stop this flow away. So, sorry, I'm just way off here somewhere else. This is a survey which the CAB UK did, published in August of this year. This is a survey of 6,000 people, which is quite a big UK survey, so it's pretty representative. It is about perception, so people are saying, I think this is what's going to happen to me, so it's not massively accurate, but it does start again to throw that about 1 in 5 people feel that they are at risk. But if we start to look at disability, for people who are shielding, or for parents and carers, again, that vulnerability to redundancy is much, much higher. And again, we can probably see those obvious links to the types of industries where people are concentrated in, and some of the data which I've been saying to you before, that these are already communities under financial stress being stressed further. Now, just as an example, this is a very crude pen picture of an industry in Scotland, an industry which has got a lot of backing in Scotland, and that local authorities and the Scottish Government have been putting significant investment into. So we're talking here about the kind of Rockstar Games end of the market, the people who develop all the video games based around Dundee and Glasgow, particularly at the moment in Scotland. Almost every deal has got like a digital element to it. So it's interesting just to look at, well, what do we know so far? So it's not the biggest industry in Scotland, 1,500 people perhaps, but only 1 in 5 of the workforce in the computer gaming industry is female. You think, well, why is this? Are women not interested in the industry? They don't play computer games? Well, there is some suggestion of that, but you know, it's not going to be the whole answer. And we see that women are segregated often more into the more low-risk activities. This is very similar to some of the experience we've seen in banking, where the guys are concentrated in the boiler houses, where they're taking big risks, working 22 hours a day, and women are concentrated in areas like insurance, which consequently lower bonuses, which gives rise to the pay gap. And again, I think we're seeing a similar situation here in computer gaming, where risk is rewarded financially, and those rewards are tending to go towards men rather than women. So we have a very high gender pay gap in the computer gaming industry, 21%. So 4 times the Scottish average. Why? Well, a lot of the research about computer gaming companies gives that kind of, it's a kind of pioneer thing. They're quite small companies. People are encouraged to work very long hours, and particularly as you're trying to get something to market. There's little evidence of flexible working. Now, I'm saying I put it in inverted commas, but it is one of those industries where you do get that sense that, you know, we're going to do everything to get this over the line, which is lovely, but it doesn't always take any prisoners in terms of who's in employment. It's interesting, something we've seen in a lot of newer industries, perhaps a bit depressingly, they are mimicking some of the worst aspects of the older industries. So I was looking recently at the offshore wind farm industry, which has got, again, about 10–15% of employees in that industry are women. And it's like, you know, we could be doing things better. So one of the things which we want to do in terms of inclusive growth is start to reward and incentivize inclusion and best practice. Now, just to finish this section, I just want to take you back to the start of the last Scottish parliamentary session, where the SNP had just been won the last election. And this is the first speech that the First Minister gave to the Scottish Parliament to set out her priorities. And this is the first thing she said. And I think it's you know, I think it's quite remarkable that a UK First Minister stands up and said, actually, the most important thing that we can do is make real and lasting progress towards equality for opportunity. And this isn't just about helping disadvantage. This is about boosting our economy, and improving the quality of life for all. And so the mission of government, as it has been for the last 5 years, and I think will continue to be going forward, is about equality of opportunity for all. And this is filtered through the Inclusive Growth Programme, through the Attainment Challenge, through skills programmes. So this is part of the national mission, and things like inclusive growth and the city and regional growth deals are all attuned to do the same thing, is to reach out and to make our economy, our industry more inclusive, more representative of the people that we are working for and with. So that's the end of the first part of the session. I'm going to pause there. I'll let the TV switch off the camera.